there are some cautionary tales
Okay.
here. And well, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but so I'm at this one church, and afterwards, this lady comes up to me and says, and she's on part of the welcoming committee. And she says, "Look, do you belong to a church?" And I said, "No, I'm kind of on this journey." And she said, "You better join a church, because if you die, you won't find a church to bury you." I was like, "Well,
Whoa.
that's one heck of a recruiting
That's a
activity."
sales pitch, yeah, right?
Yeah. And so I would say one thing, and I experience this rarely, is people coming on too strong. Now, the spoiler alert or the irony is that's where the church I wound up joining, Miss Cha Cha. So as much as I criticize it today, it must have been effective, because that's where I showed up. And that's where I ultimately joined.
You know, one of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that I get to talk to a lot of experts in ministry, experts in leadership, experts in spiritual formation. And I learn a lot from these experts that come on this podcast. I love having these conversations. Today's guest, however, is not an expert, at least not in the way that we usually think about experts. I guess you could say that today's guest is an expert church visitor. His name is Richard Riccardi, and he wrote a book called The Wandering Worshipper, and he spent a year visiting 33 different churches, mostly in the Christian tradition, a few outside of the Christian tradition, but all kinds of churches and a few other places of worship. And he learned a lot from that. And what I love about the book and about this conversation is that he just tells us what it was like. You know, what did he experience? What did it feel like? What resonated with him? What didn't resonate with him? And after this experiment of sorts, he chose one of those churches and has been a part of that church for the past 5 years. And near the end of this conversation, he tells a really wonderful story about how that church cared for his mother in her final years. This is a delightful conversation. I'm really excited to share it with you. I'm Marcus Watson, and this is episode 310 of Spiritual Life and Leadership. So let me ask you. Actually, let me start by asking you about your faith background. Like, where did your faith as a child, youth, a young adult,
Sure.
where did that start for you?
Yeah, I was a cradle Catholic. So my mom took me to church, more so made sure I got all the religious milestones, what we call the sacraments in the Catholic Church. And so I've been a lifelong Catholic. But I have to say that I was totally uninspired and entirely irregular in my church attendance. I kind of did the same for my children, made sure they got the sacraments with her assistance. But it was nothing I was ever too excited about doing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that was kind of the premise for the book, is I was putting the concept of church to the test. You know, mom says it's a good idea. Well, really isn't. And my experience hadn't been that great.
Yeah.
And so over the course of a year, I went to 33 different churches of every size, shape, color, faith, and denomination. And it's what I discovered that turned me into always and passionate. I discovered, because of the communities, that churches were the gardeners of fruitful communities. They sowed, they tended, and they reaped.
Yeah.
And now I concluded that there's a place for everyone, and everyone needs a place.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. And tell me about the moment when you thought to yourself, maybe it wasn't a moment, but sort of maybe a little season of your life where you're like, you know what? This would be an interesting experiment. What would happen if? Like, what was that moment like for you? When did that happen?
I guess so. I was in my, let's say, late 50s, and I had been cradle Catholic, and I had also participated in what we would call a little faith group, accountability group. I wouldn't call it a Bible study, but we did read some books, faith-related books. And so it was a group of 5 guys, all my age, all just like me. And we got together and we had some faith development. But there was still this missing thing about going to church and participating in community. So I just said, finally, I'm going to give it a try.
Nice.
And that's what I did.
And how did you decide which churches to attend? Because there's not a million, but it feels like a million of them. Tell me about the kinds
Certainly,
of churches. Yeah.
I'm in the North Dallas area. We're in the Bible
Okay.
Belt. There's a church on every corner,
Mm.
literally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to say that there was some brilliant method, but all it was getting on my computer, typing into the search engine, churches near me. And of course,
Mm.
lists would pop up. And I'd say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'll go give that one a try. Now, I was very intentional about wanting to have as wide a breadth of experiences as I could.
Yeah.
So that brought me to the mosque, to the Russian Orthodox, to the Baha'i, to the Hindu, to the
Mm.
Jewish temple, all those. However, I did probably focus or direct myself to smaller churches as opposed to larger churches. For the primary reason is that I am a cradle Catholic, grew up Catholic, and because of the scarcity of priests, Catholic churches are much larger.
Mm. Interesting. Okay, and so you attended these churches, and interestingly, not just Christian churches either. And you mentioned that just now. Tell me kind of the thought behind trying other faith traditions as well.
Just probably some curiosity. And
Okay.
so I just said, let me just see. I mean, I'd like to think as I grew up, I was a man about town and I knew a lot of things about other religions. But the reality was I had never stepped into those other houses of worship, or
Hmm.
maybe I'd stepped into them once for a funeral or a wedding or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Plus, I would say my family history made me just a little bit more receptive to other faiths.
Hmm.
So while my mom was a staunch Catholic, on her Catholic First Communion, her surname is Cohen, a decidedly
Hmm.
Jewish surname. Well,
Yeah.
what happened is my Irish Catholic grandmother married my Russian Jewish grandfather.
Okay.
Regretfully, he succumbed to illness when my mom was only 3 weeks old. So
Hmm.
she was raised Catholic by my Irish grandmother. But it's just kind of a
Okay.
strange twist of fate
Yeah.
that if he would have survived, she might have been a nice Jewish girl and I would have been a nice Jewish boy.
Yeah.
And so I'll say that twist of faith, and people would call it providence, and I was
Hmm.
saved and I was spared or whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But
Sure.
it certainly, if nothing else, it just made me more receptive to other faiths.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
Um.
afraid to
Oh.
explore other faiths.
Yeah, good, good. So I'm sure you have visited more houses of worship of other faiths than probably most or maybe any of our listeners. And so, can you? This is a question of curiosity. Can you tell me what you experienced, what it felt like, and what you experienced in terms of the practices, but also the reception? Like, what was that like? And maybe you can
Sure.
even name a few of those places of worship.
Yeah. So, uh, and that's great. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. Because one thing I'll validate what you said
Uh-huh.
is that when I started telling people about this journey, they said, oh, I thought I'd been to a lot of churches, but I really realized
Mm.
I haven't the others,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
so rarely. So it was kind of a unique
And
experience.
I should add, you've been to more places of worship than I have, but right
And
in terms of different faiths, right? So anyway, I don't want to say only our listeners. It's me too. So I'm curious. I want to know what that was like. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, I just walked in, and here's the thing: as I was saying, they can't lock me out. This is a house of
Mhm.
worship. This is a house of God. So that even if they don't like me, they got to accept me because it is a house of God, and they have to accept me. So I will say that it wasn't anything. It wasn't any big insurmountable hurdle walking in there. I kind of felt comfortable. I knew that they were going to be friendly to me. I knew that they were going to accept me. And in no
Mm,
place was I shunned at all. Now, it was fun. I do have one funny story about the Russian Orthodox Church. So
okay.
I walk in there and they were having a baptism. I walked in a few minutes early and they were having a baptism right inside the front
Mm,
door. So I walk in the front door, the door slams behind me, and I'm literally closer to the baptismal font than the Godfather of the
oh
baby. It
gosh.
was unbelievable. So someone I
That's
was like
funny.
a deer in headlights, and someone shooed me to the side.
Yeah.
But I participated in the entire service. It was about an hour and a half, maybe close to two
Hmm.
hours. And I would say that was the only place that didn't welcome me. Of the, I don't know if they thought I was KGB or CIA, but no one would even make eye contact with me. That was the
Wow.
only place. Otherwise, I say where I was most different, I was most welcomed. Now let's take for the case of race, for instance, not only different faiths,
Mm,
but let's talk about race. So I walk into churches that have 100% Black congregations. So they
mhm.
know I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
But I never felt that way and I never got treated that way. I mean, from
Mm,
before I walked in the parking lot, I started to be greeted. I started to be hugged. I started to be kissed. I was welcomed
mm. Wow.
extraordinarily
Yeah.
in every. I went to three different ones in every circumstance. I never got a reception. It was an unbelievable reception. I went to a South
Mm,
Asian non-denominational Christian church. Same
mhm.
exact experience. Everyone had darker skin than me, with South Asian Indians.
Uh-huh.
They didn't even notice. They noticed to the extent that I was a visitor, so they could especially welcome me.
Sure.
But it was nothing. Um,
Yeah.
no discomfort. Now, on the other face, the mosque. Uh, I walked in there. I have to admit, I went with two friends, and that was 3,000 of my closest friends at the mosque. It
Yeah.
was Friday afternoon prayers. Um, but everyone was cordial. Certainly my skin I have a little bit of an olive complexion, so maybe I could get away with it. But
Mhm, mhm.
still, it was pretty obvious,
Yeah.
more likely that people would recognize. Not one person, looked at me askance. And
Hmm.
in fact, afterwards, I'll have to tell you this little story. So afterwards,
Yeah.
when my friends were milling around talking, and this guy walks up to me, and at first I didn't recognize him, and then it popped in my mind, oh, this is a doorman at my mom's building.
Hmm.
And so we chatted for a few
Wow.
minutes. But what it had done is there was just every time I walked into the building beforehand, it was hello, and it's really hot outside, isn't
Yeah.
it? After that, my presence at the mosque and him seeing me there just kind of made
Mhm.
things thaw or opened up a door. And
Yeah.
so then every time I saw him, it opened up a relationship, whether
Mm.
we're talking about our families or his joy over buying a new house.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I think that's a great story. Um, I'm curious, as you visited all of these churches, were there any what were the kinds of things that made you uncomfortable? I want to get to what you've already shared, some of the things that made you comfortable, and I want to hear about some more of them, what you liked, what you didn't like. But what are some things that made you uncomfortable in some of these places, perhaps?
You know what? I wish I had some more stories for you, but
Oh,
I don't. But I
hmm,
will have to. There are some cautionary tales
okay.
here, and well, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but so I'm at this one church, and afterwards, this lady comes up to me and says, and she's on part of the welcoming committee, and she says, "Look, do you belong to a church?" And I said, "No, I'm kind of on this journey." And she said, "You better join a church because if you die, you won't find a church to bury you." I was like, "Well,
Whoa.
that's one heck, that's one heck of a recruiting
That's a sales
activity."
pitch, yeah, right?
Yeah, and so I would say one thing, and I experience this rarely, is people coming on too strong. Now, the spoiler alert or the irony is that's where the church I wound up joining, Miss Cha Cha. So,
Hmm.
as much as I criticize it today, it must have been effective because that's where I showed up and that's
Oh,
where I
funny.
ultimately joined.
Oh.
So, I would just say, and I've noticed in my church, and I've mentioned it to some people, sometimes we
Mhm,
come on a little too strong. That we, in the guise of being friendly, we're like,
mhm.
oh, now this is going to be your church. Well,
Yeah.
it sounds beautifully welcoming, but you have to
Uh-huh.
remember people are at all different stages
Yeah.
of their journey and have all different types of personalities.
Yeah, right.
So you have to be, real careful.
Yeah.
As I shared my journey with someone one time, my cousin's girlfriend, she said, "Yeah, I went to this church, and they were like inviting me back and coming up and talking to me after." And it was like they don't know me that way. How can they come and talk to me so in such a friendly fashion?
Yeah.
And so, what we think is beautiful and friendly, some people may regard as too strong. See,
Right.
hey, it's a delicate balance, right? It's
Yeah,
just like
right.
any type of relationship. You're going to meet some people who are more open. I'm kind of an
Yeah.
open guy. I welcomed it. Some people are
Yeah.
going to be put off by it. So you really have
Right.
to be careful. I'm not advocating for Miss Cha-Cha's,
Yeah.
be careful if you
Right.
die
Right.
pitch. I don't, that is
I
not,
wouldn't either.
that is
uh,
not um, a recommendation whatsoever.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
hey, things, having the welcoming committee is always very nice. People feel good
Yeah.
about that. There's someone to say hi, there's someone to guide them. I'll
Yeah.
tell you another little funny story. I went to the
Okay.
Latter-day Saints LDS church. There's one
Okay.
150 yards from my house.
Hmm.
So I show up there, I walk in the back door, and I don't know where the sanctuary is. I'm kind of lost.
Mm.
There's all these classrooms. I see some people in a classroom. I don't want to disturb them. They're talking. And I'm worried because the LDS have this very clannish reputation.
Hmm.
So I walk down the hall. Finally, this guy sees me. He says, "Hey, can I help you?" And I said, "Look, I'd like to attend services. I've never attended here before. Can you help me?"
Uh,
"Of course, come on in." So he
yeah.
takes me to the sanctuary, and he gets these two bicycle riding boys.
Uh,
They're missionaries. He says, "Hey,
uh-huh.
boys, I'm going to put him here with you. You answer any questions he might have." And so, and he obviously knew I was an LDS, all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
No concern. 10 people after services um, came
Then
up to
people have.
greet me
Oh,
after
good. Yeah. Yeah.
after
Okay.
services.
Yeah.
10 people came
Good.
up, including a guy I knew from business that I didn't know he was there,
Oh, that's cool.
and he came
Good.
on up and said hello. So it overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly positive
Yeah. Uh,
experiences.
I'm curious about like the worship services themselves, aside from the people who are there. What kinds of things? And I'm not like I'm just asking for your thoughts, not for like, oh, this is what churches should or shouldn't do,
Yeah,
because again, eh, there are certain kinds of styles of worship service that I like, and there are different ones that different people like. But I'm just curious if you, Richard, what are some of the things that you went into a worship service and you said, "Oh, that I like that. That's something I like how they're doing this." Because right,
yes,
they all have different. They have sermons. They all have music. They all have, if they're Christian, they all have communion. And the baptisms and those kinds of things. Like, oh, I like how this church does that. Not as a way of saying this
yeah,
is how every church should do it, but what did you like?
right. Well, and that's a good way to preface it.
Yeah.
My book is very observational and
Mm,
not instructive. So I want to tell
yeah.
you everything I observed. And in fact, a major criticism of my book is that it is not an evangelical call to practice any faith,
Mm,
including Christianity. Now it's clear
hmm.
I'm Christian in it, but it's
Hmm.
not an evangelical call, and I've been subject to some criticism for that.
Mm,
But my goal, and I'll answer your question, is to get
uh-huh.
people to participate in a church. And then I
Mm,
say, if our communities are what they are, they will take the people where they need to
yeah.
go.
Yeah.
But what did I like and what I didn't like? So as a cradle Catholic, I'm used to a very regimented service. Anywhere you go in the world, it's the same exact song and dance for the Catholic Church.
Mm, hmm.
And so now, what I really like about that is it's predictable. You know when it's
Hmm.
going to be over when you get to the car. But there's also it's also very solemn that the Catholic faith and many that I looked at, like Presbyterian, Episcopal, and Lutheran, or similar, Anglican also, and that they're fairly or very equally reverent. And so
Mm,
you're really there worshiping your Lord, and you're kind of in the presence of the Lord, and it's
mm,
real serious.
mhm.
However, for many Catholics, including myself, and the problem lies within, is God, this is kind of boring. We're reciting the same
Mm,
prayers. It's kind of the same thing every time. And it's hard and it's more difficult to get engaged. And of course, the Catholics will tell you, hey, this is not for entertainment. You're not here for entertainment.
mhm.
You're here to worship
Yeah,
your Lord. And I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
However, I went to other services and I'll put let's say, many of the non denominational Christian services in this basket, and
Mm,
that um, it is much more of a community experience and much more of a relationship experience. And
mhm.
so, yeah, there is this extended period of singing, which is called praise and worship or worship, and that
Yeah.
goes on to the into the sermon. Now, I was the old Catholic who I just liked a few hymns, and the shorter the better. Like if they said we're going to sing all 4 verses, I would just be crushed. But then I started going to non-denominational Christian churches and getting into the music. And finally, I realized the purpose of the music was not something you had to endure before you got to the service, but it's kind of the warm up before the workout. It lathers you
Mm,
up for the
mm,
sermon.
mm.
And so I really started enjoying that. The other thing is then at the non-denominational Christian churches, I really started enjoying the sermons, despite the fact that they were much more lengthy than a Catholic homily or the Catholic sermon. I
Mm.
just felt like there was more, um, and I certainly don't, and let me just stop here,
Hmm.
don't want my words to be interpreted as a criticism of the Catholic service or the
Sure.
Catholic Church,
Yeah, yeah,
because I admire it. And like I said, the problem is me more than anything
yeah.
else.
Well,
And this is
and it's your
where I'm at.
experience. You're just sharing kind of your experience and what you appreciated. Yeah.
Right. So I started gravitating towards the worship experience and the
Mhm.
sermon experience at the non
Mhm.
denominational Christian church. And
Mm.
I really just enjoyed that.
That's
It,
great.
it was it was more relaxed.
Mhm.
It was more casual. Yeah, I go in jeans to church, which horrified my mom. And I wasn't wearing dress pants, but
Yeah, yeah,
it was just a more casual experience.
yeah,
And maybe
yeah.
that's what I needed at this stage of
Mhm.
my life
Right,
to
right.
get approached and to get welcomed in.
Yeah, right.
And maybe I'm not
Uh,
going to answer the question, but I do have, go ahead.
no, 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 you go ahead and finish.
Because I was going to divert onto another subject for pastors,
Yeah, go ahead, go
because
ahead.
they've got a church and people walking in the door. And
Mhm.
so we've already discussed how maybe the other members of the congregation should interact with those people.
Yeah.
So we got that. But now, what effect does this have on the pastor besides
Mhm.
leading their worship and welcoming teams?
Yeah.
How does this affect the message? Because you have all sorts of people coming in there. You have people who this is their first time they've ever been in a church, and you have people
Mhm.
who've been in church every day for 70 years, know the Bible backward and forward, and can recite it to you before
Yeah,
you can even say it.
yeah.
So how do you tailor your message? How do you tailor your environment to that? Um,
Mm.
how do you relate to people at different levels of spiritual maturity?
Yeah,
Because you don't want to compromise your values. So for
yeah,
sure, we have values. Whatever your faith tenets values, you need to respect those, and you can't
yeah.
water them down, and you can't make them untrue.
Mhm.
Uh, but at the same time, if I'm walking in off the street, I may not be prepared. You know the verse in the Bible, I had to give them milk because they weren't ready for me,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
so, and I tell you what, that is a difficult line. I'll
Mm.
tell a little experience. So after church, we have an invitation. Hey, if it's your first time, meet with us in the prayer room. There'll be some
Yeah.
people in there. And I volunteer to be one of the people. I am now a deacon at my church, and I
Oh,
volunteer to be
cool.
one of those people.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes an elder's in there.
Mm.
So when I talk to the people, speak, and I assume maybe perhaps my own experience, and that they're just maybe they're sticking their toe in the water. They've not gone to church a lot. And so I am speaking of, hey, we're a welcoming environment here. I
Mhm.
hope you like what you saw. Please give us another chance. That's about all
Yeah,
I want to do. Give
yeah,
us another chance, come back. Where sometimes my elder next to me will say, hey, I want you to know we're strictly biblically based. We speak right from the Bible, and this is the place you're going to get your religious instruction. Well,
mm.
hey, both are true. The environment
Uh-huh.
exists in both ways, but
Yeah,
it's his perspective is entirely different than mine.
yeah,
And some
yeah,
people are looking for that. Hey, I'm looking around and I want to make sure this is a church that follows the Bible strictly, and you're going to beat it into my head every Sunday. And
yeah,
some people want that.
yeah.
And we all need it.
Yeah, right, right. So what that makes me think of another conversation I recently had for the podcast. They talked about something called sacred. This was sort of their coined expression, sacred listening. He talked about, and just the importance.
uh,
He was talking about in the context of youth ministry, but the importance of really listening to kids, right? And that helps, but I think also adults. And so what the reason I think about that, based on what you were just saying, you know, when you meet someone new who's visiting your church, um, what I kind of hear you perhaps at least implying is that it's important to kind of listen to them and get a sense of where are they coming from. Um, and as we listen to them, right, we're not just giving them cookie cutter answers, but we're actually responding to who they are. I don't know if that resonates with your experience at all.
Absolutely. And admittedly, I need to do a better job of listening
Uh-huh.
and inquiring when I'm doing this after church.
Mm,
Hey, have you been
yeah.
going every day for 70 years? This is the first time you've come in 10 years. And then kind
Mm,
of tailor maybe my response or
yeah.
some
Yeah.
comments, uh, based on that. The other thing I
Yeah.
would recommend to pastors is we are very provincial about our own faith. We all
Mm,
think our own
mhm.
faith and our own religion is the best. It's right and it's the
That's right.
best, and everyone should be us.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Sure.
uh, and that is truth. But how do you express it in a kind way? Um,
Yeah.
because like I'm a cradle Catholic. I no
Yeah.
longer practice Catholicism. I go to a non-denominational Christian church.
Yeah.
But here's what I say. There is someone in my church that loves to gratuitously, I believe, and maybe I'm defensive, go out of his way to criticize the Catholic Church
Mhm.
when I'm around. It feels
Oh,
like, hey,
they
he's picking on
do.
the Catholic.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a church leader
okay.
while I was in deacon training, would go out of his way to say bad things about I thought were critical things about the Catholic.
Uh-huh.
It's an error. It's not right. Well, here's one of the things. The Catholic Church has been around a while. I
Yeah.
bet you, I don't know the answer, but I bet you I could get a Catholic scholar to come in here and brilliantly refute whatever you just said. But
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
not the point.
Yeah.
That's not the point. I'm
Right.
not in
Right.
a match who's
Yeah.
better, who's smarter, who's superior.
Yeah.
I'm here to love God and love others.
Yeah. I love that.
And
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Were you gonna say add anything? It looked like you might were maybe gonna add something.
yeah, and
Uh,
and so I think pastors and their
Uh-huh.
leaders in the church ought to be sensitive to how they think
Mm.
about other faiths. Yeah. I
Yeah.
was having a discussion about the book. So again, one of the criticisms of my book, I'm not evangelical. I'm too
Okay.
welcoming and accepting of other faiths. That's
Mhm.
a legitimate criticism. If you can be too welcoming, it's a criticism. And we were talking about this at a meeting right before with the deacons and an elder and the pastor,
Yeah.
and so the book and that kind of conversation came on up.
Uh-huh.
And in my book, I say, look, I'm
Uh-huh.
Christian. I believe Jesus is the way, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know how he's going to accomplish it. And
Mm.
the and when this elder steps up and says, well, you know, Islam is definitely wrong. Muhammad's
Mhm.
dead.
Mm.
And that just settles the issue for all for
Right.
anything and all
Yeah,
concerned.
right.
And so the billion Muslims, it's just this simple. I just need to tell you that Muhammad is dead, and you
Right.
should just fall
Right.
over.
Right.
Yeah. Look,
Well,
if you're from I just have a quick story. If you're
yeah.
from New York, you'll never convince me that Chicago deep dish pizza is better than New York Neapolitan pizza. And likewise, you can't. But I expect
Uh-huh.
that, hey, Muhammad's dead. You better just fall right over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the
um,
challenge with that is it cuts off conversation, right? And I think if we want to love our neighbors, as you have said, right, cutting off conversation is not the way to do that. I think opening up conversation and being willing to learn from each other is is how one of the ways, at least, that we can love one another, love our neighbors. So I appreciate that you said that. Um, I were in all those that year of visiting all these churches. Were there any moments that maybe you kind of remember where you felt like you felt sort of moved in some way, emotionally or spiritually? You felt like, oh, this was a special moment. Did you have any of those? And if not, that's okay. But I'm wondering if you did.
yeah. So, I mean, yes, I did have some special moments. I think I was really struck a lot of times by the praise and worship time that
Mm-hmm.
I, and admittedly, more contemporary hymns
Mm-hmm.
that really kind of touched me,
Mm,
got the blood flowing, and
mm,
got me going.
yeah.
Um, just, hey, some particularly special times. One time I went to church, and it was the week a friend of mine had died. And
Mm,
he was 50 years old. In fact, his 50th birthday he passed away.
mm,
And so I
mm.
was kind of feeling a little obviously glum. And so I was
Yeah.
at this church. And afterwards, the pastor came up and introduced himself. And I said hello. And I just said, hey, this has been a rough week. My friend died. And he goes, hey, let me
Mm,
just stop. And I want to pray with you
mm.
and pray
Yeah.
for you and his family. And that was just a very beautiful and special experience.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
love that.
all the conversations that I had walking in church and out of church with people all struck me as special. So I went to actually one black non-denominational Christian church, black congregation, and so I met the pastor beforehand. I was walking around the parking lot. I was early. He saw me, came on out and said hello, and drug me back into the church and said, "Let me introduce you to some people."
Mm-hmm.
So it's time for service to start, and I just go sit by myself in one of the rows.
Yeah.
Well, a young man who I'd met before the service comes over and sits down next to me. He goes, hey, I don't want you to be sitting by yourself when you're at our
Oh,
church.
nice.
Yeah, I had a million experiences like that.
Yeah.
And so very beautiful. But I want to, and I'll take a moment now
Yeah.
to emphasize, well, I want to get back to the same thing about, doctrine. And I remember
Oh, okay.
listening to your podcast with Michael Frost and Alan Hirsch.
Oh, okay. Yep.
They were your guests. And it talked about that um, that being Christ centered instead of gospel centered. Now, I don't
Mm.
want to, at all minimize the importance of the gospel. That's the book we
Uh-huh.
read, and that's the
Yeah.
book we follow. But it was interesting they said is that if you're not, then you're just focusing on religion
Mm.
and not focusing on Christ
Yeah.
when you focus on
Yeah.
the gospel sometimes and the
Yeah.
rules. So I think that's again sending a message to the people about what's important and beating
Yeah.
them beating I don't want to get into doctrine and theology because
Okay.
number one I'm not qualified, but
Mhm.
uh, beating the head over beating people over the head with rules and
Yeah.
doctrine
Right.
doesn't speak to their heart. It speaks to
Yeah.
their head but not their heart,
Yeah.
and we want to
Yeah.
speak to their heart.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I like to tell people, so, I'm a pastor, and I say,
Yes.
Jesus always, I mean, he didn't use these words, but basically his part of his message was it's not about the rules, it's about who are you, at what kind of person are you, right? And he says, love God, love your neighbor, and he says all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. If you just focus on loving God and loving your neighbor, all the other rules take care of themselves. So anyway, I love that.
No, I love that. And in the appendix, I talk about all our different battles between the faiths
Yeah.
and
Mm,
speak to that specifically, where
hmm.
Jesus talks about, I think it was in the Gospel of Mark, well, in very, very many places, where he talks about the important values, not the laws.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think uh, now, before anyone writes in about my acceptance of other faiths, here's what I say: is I am not a chimpanzee. If you didn't notice, now I share 99% of the DNA of a chimpanzee, but I'm not.
Mm, yeah.
And so, likewise, I share many of the same values, and I have
Hmm.
common human nature of other people's other faiths. So we're
Hmm.
not the same, but it
Yeah.
gives us a basis for understanding and acceptance.
Yeah. That's right.
That's
That's
what I
right.
say.
Yeah. I love that.
That's the context. I'm not trying to say I'm
Yeah.
a chimpanzee or I'm
Of
Muslim or
course.
I'm Hindu. No, no, I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you touch on this a little bit. I was looking at your book, Thingification. I
Oh, cool.
pronounced that correctly, right?
Yeah, you got
And,
it.
and in the description that you say, we begin to understand that what God really wants us is to heal the world. We want to
Hmm.
help our church bless our communities and restore shalom in the world. And it's not just being bigger and better churches. And
Yeah.
I love that message because I love the community aspect of it. And let me tell you
Yeah. Yeah.
what I would hope. Well, I don't want to interrupt you if you have
No,
something to
no.
say about that.
Go ahead. No, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
because I'm about to launch into the powerful community aspects of church.
Okay. I was just going to say, you're the first guest to ever cite my book, Beyond Thingification. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, you are most welcome.
Yeah.
No, I wanted
Anyway,
to.
go on. Thank you.
So, what would our churches aspire to be in terms of community? And what Martin Luther King said 50 years ago, that 11 a.m. on Sunday is the most segregated hour in America, still primarily holds true. I
Yeah.
discovered, except for
Yeah.
your big ones like Catholics, where they have to throw them
Sure.
all together because it's shortage of priests, or
Hmm.
the Muslims who come from many different ethnic and racial backgrounds. We're still very segregated.
Yeah.
But let me tell you about a little experience I had. So I told you I walked into churches with, and I call them non-denominational Christian churches with Black congregations,
Mm.
not necessarily Black churches.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that
Interesting.
is because you will walk into one and you'll be accepted entirely.
Mm.
And I
Hmm.
don't know if it's because of it's a higher level or because of they're relating to me on a lower foundational level, but children of God.
Yeah. What do you mean by higher
So the
level?
time I went,
Uh,
I mean, like, on a higher spiritual level or on a low level, depending on how arrogant I want to feel about my,
I
I'm
see.
relating
Okay.
on a higher level. Perhaps I should say, no, it's a foundational
I
level
see.
that we're
Yes, I
children of
got you. I
God.
got you. Yeah.
But despite Miss Cha Cha giving me the hard sell, I had a wonderful experience then. I kind of wondered, now, what happens if I came back every week? Would they still treat me the same
Hmm.
way?
Hmm.
Well, the church wound up getting also put to the test. Because
Hmm.
after the first year, I narrowed it down to two churches, both non denominational Christian churches. One had 100% South Asian Indian, one had 100% Black. So
Hmm.
here I was, this middle aged white guy going to two churches where I, on the face, do not belong. But
Hmm.
in the heart and love of God, of course I belonged.
Yeah.
And so, like the child of divorced parents, I was alternating back and forth every weekend
Hmm.
between the two churches. And after a year, I wound up joining the church with the all Black congregation.
Wow.
And it didn't even cause a ripple in the
Yeah.
church.
Wow.
What's remarkable is that I like to write. Obviously, I'm a writer. I have a book, The Wandering Worshiper. I haven't even mentioned the title,
Uh-huh.
but I got a book
Yeah.
called The Wandering Worshiper. But before that, I used to write about my travel experiences. And I had gone to Charleston a few times and wrote about
Hmm.
slavery, racism, and plantation homes, obviously hot
Okay.
button issues. Well, just a few months after I joined the church, something motivated me to send those to the pastor.
Hmm.
Well, it just so happened to be during Black History Month.
Hmm.
So he summons me to call him. And I was kind of scared, like the elementary school kid who had broken some rules going to the principal's office.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gingerly dialed the phone and he answered and he goes, "Wow, I read these. These are great. Okay, this
Yeah.
Sunday for the Black History Month, you're going to get up on stage and talk about these subjects to our congregation a few
Hmm.
months after joining the church."
Yeah.
And I was able to do it, and
Hmm.
no one batted an eye. I'm sure someone batted an eye,
Wow.
but I
Yeah.
was able to do it, incredibly well received,
Yeah.
and it was nothing.
That's awesome.
And that's how it's
Yeah.
been for 5 years. I keep waiting for someone to
5
realize I'm
years.
white, I'm not one of them, and
Wow.
it hasn't come on up yet.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say that they taught me the meaning of we. Well, it was they because it's me and them, it's Black and white.
Mm.
And so it's they. I walked in there saying, "Look at this congregation. Look what those people, they are. I am not one
Yeah.
of them. They are different from me."
Hmm. Hmm.
But they taught me unequivocally and immediately is that no, we are all one. We are all in this house of God together, and you're a
Yeah.
child of God. That's all you
Hmm.
got going for you as a child of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
love that.
they taught me the meaning of we. Well, it gets even
Yeah.
better. It gets a lot better, in fact. So my mom's mobility is declining. And so I had to find a place to incarcerate her for the rest of her life. So there just so happened to be a place right across the street from my church. So I incarcerated her over there. Well, she hadn't been able to go to church because literally she couldn't even get in and out of a car anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find a place, not within walking distance, but within rolling distance of her new home.
Mm. Wow.
And my church fit the bill.
Hmm.
Now, my mom was a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. When I told her about this church journey, she said, "That's fine, but I just want to tell you to remember your soul is stained with the mark of Catholicism." No guilt or anything, but just
Yeah.
letting you know where
Yeah.
it's at.
Yeah.
Whew. So I said, "Okay, mom,
Uh,
but here you are. Let me take you to church." She goes, "Okay, I'll go." To get a day pass out of the jail, she's going to go. So I
yeah.
wheel her over. And the first few times I bring her, it's like, oh my gosh, she was so out of her element. It wasn't just
Mm.
the people, it was the service. It was dimly lit inside the church. The
Mm-hmm.
music was real loud. This was not anything she was used to. And literally, she cried while she was there. But the
Wow.
people came up and just kind of wanted to come up and say hi and meet her. They were a little bit, didn't know what to make of her when she was crying. But let me tell you, within about a month, she experienced a conversion that
Hmm.
Billy Graham never accomplished. She
Wow.
hit the door, she'd be clapping her hands, raising her voice in song, tapping her feet. And after every service, it was like a scene out of The Godfather on the occasion of his daughter's wedding. She would be mobbed by no less than 20 people, hugging her and kissing
Oh,
her and loving on her. It
yeah.
was unbelievable. She never had a church experience like this.
Hmm.
And in fact, because I like to travel, there'd be some Sundays she was going to miss. Well, two
Yeah.
women emerged and said, "Wait, you're out of town. You just text us. We're going to go get her."
Wow.
And
Wow.
so the last 18 months of her life, she only missed church once because of a driving rainstorm.
Wow.
But it gets better if it can. So Easter 2024, I'm out of town visiting my granddaughters. And so the guardians take her to church, bring her back. And one of them texts me and says, "Richard, your mom's not feeling too well." And I was like, "Well, big deal. She's an old lady. Don't worry about it." Well, about 6 hours later, the assisted living calls me and says, "We're not asking for permission. She's on the way to the hospital."
Hmm.
So I'm like, oh no. So I text
Yeah.
Reagan and Chupin and I said, "Hey, mom's going to the hospital. Just want to let you know." Boom. That activated Chupin. She almost beat my nephew to the hospital, who's the other branch of the
Wow.
family.
Hmm.
In her hand was the bag with the pajamas and the slippers. She
Hmm.
never left my mom's side and was literally holding her hand until the moment she passed away at 6 a.m. the next morning.
Wow. Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's the kind of community. Yeah. And so this was an old lady who couldn't walk, couldn't do anything for the church. She didn't really even talk that much anymore. And I
Yeah.
oversaw her finances. She never gave a penny to the church. She couldn't
Yeah.
carry on a conversation, but it didn't make any
Yeah.
difference to my church.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautiful. I love that. One of the last questions I have my little list of questions, and we hit some of them, but one of them, which you answered it already, but I want to name the question. What I'd written down was, what do you think the broader culture gets wrong about what happens inside a church? And what you just described, I think people who aren't a part of the church would never imagine um, that
Oh,
that's what happens.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happens at church. And I want to say, like, rumors of Mark Twain's death, the negative about church is exaggerated. Now, sure,
Hmm.
bad things happen at church. Everything bad in the
Sure.
world regretfully happens at church because
Yeah.
guess what? They're full of people just like us.
Yeah.
But what I can say, they occur to a lesser extent. And there's
Yeah.
always this aspiration to do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And I want to say, I believe one of the crowning achievements of my book
Uh-huh.
is that people who are exposed to it, who don't go to church, if nothing else, it lessens the automatic negative reflexive action that many people have towards church. For instance, someone who read my book, as part of the book publishing process, let's say. Uh, she read the book and she goes, "Hey, I never went when I engaged her." She goes, "Look, never went to church. It's not part of my life." I said, "Fine. You're editing the book."
Yeah.
And she said, "But after reading your book, when I drove by a church, I kind of wondered what they were doing inside. And I never thought
Hmm.
about that before." Then she said, "I happen to be a singer and I sing with a group of people.
Hmm.
And you know what? They told me that on Friday night, the Episcopalians get together and sing.
Hmm.
And I may go do that sometime because I read your book." Well, a
Yeah.
month later, I'm on the phone with her. She goes, "You know what? I went with the Episcopalians to sing. And it's
Wow.
kind of a nice time." I said, she goes, "I may even do it again." I go, "That's great."
Yeah.
So a month later, I talk with her on the phone. She goes, "I went back with the Episcopalians and sang again. We had a real good time."
Mhm.
Now, I don't know if she ever went back to church again or when she might go, but I know that a seed was planted. And not only that, then when someone
Yeah.
brings up church, she's not going to clench her fists.
Yeah. Right. That's
And if someone, or if there's a discussion about church, she may say, it's
yeah.
maybe I don't go, but you know what? I read this book and then I went a couple of times and it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, I'm very grateful that you did the work that a lot of people would never even think to do. you know, um, Visiting 33 different churches of all kinds, and then documenting your experiences in those churches. And I'm grateful for what you shared with us today. And I especially love the story about your mom. What a gift, right? It's like, and even if the sermons are just mediocre, and even if the music is just mediocre, my opinion, but if a person experiences love and kindness and friendship in the way that you described, I think it covers up a multitude of deficiencies in a church. Right. And so, anyway, that's one of the things that I take from what you shared. Just
Um,
focus on loving people, and
yeah. Well,
the
I think what you're saying is so true. Well, look, hey, my wife loves me despite a multitude of deficiencies, right?
yeah, yeah,
And she might say that, but I can still love him. And so maybe one of the things would be an expectation of what you might find in
yeah,
church. And so we
mm,
expect it to be nirvana and everything is beautiful and
yeah,
it's the Garden of Eden. No,
yeah,
it's not going to
yeah,
be perfect. It's just like
yeah,
me. It's just like you. It's just like my significant other.
yeah,
And though, despite imperfections, and maybe sometimes despite not liking them, we can
yeah,
still love them and we can still
yeah,
love the church. And so
yeah,
I've told you some things that I don't like about my church. And one of the church leaders, criticizing
right,
Catholicism, and that could make
yeah,
me really mad. And maybe it does, but hey, I can love him. I can love the church,
yeah,
just like people have to love me despite my imperfections.
yeah.
So I
That's
really,
right.
and the church journey continues. Now, when I say I'm always impassionate, I jokingly say, and this is a joke, that no
Uh-huh.
matter how late I'm at the club, and no matter how hungover I am on Sunday morning, and no matter where I am in the world, I am at church. And it
Oh,
doesn't
good.
matter if I'm getting off a cruise ship in Lisbon, Portugal.
Mm,
Within a couple of hours, I'm at the Riverfront Church in Lisbon.
wow,
And
wow,
it's wherever I am. Now, the past 2 years, it's been 51 times.
wow.
I was doing some travel and of all places, on a Sunday, I got thwarted in the Rome airport and near the Rome airport
Oh,
last
wow.
year. But otherwise, every other
Well,
weekend,
good for
every other
you. That's
Sunday or Saturday. Hey, we had a snowstorm this past few weeks
uh-huh,
ago in Dallas,
uh-huh.
and everything was closed down. But I knew I could rely on my Catholic brethren because under
Uh,
the penalty of hell, you got to go to
uh,
church. So I knew they were going to be open. I went, and even though, to their credit, on the website they said, "Hey, you're excused. You don't have to get out
oh,
on the
funny.
snow."
Yeah, good.
But they were open. The LDS right by my house, they were
Yeah,
closed. So
interesting.
you can always find a Catholic church
Yeah, yeah.
open.
That's
So you never
funny.
have an excuse not to go.
That's right. That's right. Well, Richard, thank you so much for sharing all this with us today. Let me just ask you, if anybody wanted to find out more about you or the work that you're doing, where could they go?
Oh, real simple. TheWanderingWorshipper.com. That goes right to my website. It's a link to buy the book if you're so inclined, and or it tells you more about me, my blog that I write. And as I mentioned before, I love to sell books, and I want everyone to come click on the website. But really, I want to, if I had one thing to leave here today, is I want people to maybe put aside some of the negative perceptions about church, explore church, and seize the benefit of community worship.
Awesome.
And I want 10,000 people to hear the message. And for your pastors, I want to encourage you to create places that are welcoming and loving so that people will say, you will find me there every single Sunday.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Hey, if this episode was helpful to you, I hope that you'll share it with another leader who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper on helping your church engage in God's mission in the way that your church is uniquely called and wired to reach your neighborhood, I want to invite you to grab a copy of my book, Beyond Thingification, Helping Your Church Engage in God's Mission. You can find that on Amazon. And you can also get a free study guide at marcuswatson.com/book, and that's Marcus with a K. The music you hear on this episode is by Derek Rice, and you can find his music on any streaming platform. And again, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time here on Spiritual Life and Leadership.